Kathleen Andrews is the owner, designer, and teacher of a pattern company called QuiltArt. Her designs are all based on Celtic designs. They're really great designs, and I think you're going to like her technique.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Andrews. I own a company called QuiltArt. I'm based in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Today we're going to talk about Celtic Made Easy. It does look a little intimidating, and we're going to break it down into making it super, super simple. The Celtic that you're seeing on all three of these quilts, the Celtic part is the same, but then I've just put different finishing techniques on each one of these. This one is probably the easiest one. The area on the out there is done with one large strip set. Since all of those design strips are exactly the same, you make one big strip set, cut it into the widths that you need, and then it's just borders put around a center. So that one finishes up very, very quickly. So let's just get right into the meat and potatoes of this. We're going to start with the easiest way to trace the design onto the background. I used to use a light box, which is fine, but it can be a little tricky with the black fabric, being able to see through it. So what I've gone to is using transfer paper. And this is the transfer paper that I use. This is the kind of paper that we used when we made dresses and were doing darts in the dresses. So this way, with the transfer paper, we're able to layer the background fabric, the transfer paper on top, and then I have the Celtic pattern on top of that. And the only trick to this is make sure that you use a pen that's not black. The template is in black, and if you start tracing in black, you won't see where you traced. So if you're tracing in red, you're going to be able to see where you have traced. And it doesn't take long to go ahead and trace all of this. And the pattern does include all of your intersections so that you know where your pieces are woven over and under. And that's one of the things with Celtic, is that Celtic is woven over and under. So at every intersection, if one intersection is over, the next one is going to be under, and then over, under. So it's a very predictable pattern. So as you're working it, if you have an over intersection, you know both sides of it on the other sides are going to be under intersections. So it's a very logical progression going through that. So once we have the background design drawn, we're going to start making the bias tubes. And what I do is, this is a 1/3 yard fabric, and I'm cutting on a 45-degree angle to the selvage. And this way, when you're cutting on the bias, this is called cutting on the bias, when you're doing that, it gives you the fabric the ability to bend a little bit without having puckers. So very important to do this on the bias. And now I'm only doing strips this long. I'm not going to do continuous bias because, as I said, the Celtic is woven over and under, and we'll be able to hide our tails in an under intersection. So you're always going to start at an under intersection, take a tube as far as you can go to the next under intersection that you get to, and then just cut it off, or it might even travel that far, and then just start a new one. So you don't have to make miles of continuous tubing to be weaving through. So we're just going to be making the smaller tubes there. So once we cut, we're going to be cutting 1-inch strips of fabric. Let me actually move this and bring this so you've got a better background. We're going to be cutting 1-inch strips of fabric, and then we're going to fold the fabric in half. And we're going to fold it so that the right side is on the outside. We're not going to be turning these inside out. So we've already got the right side on the outside. And then we're going to sew it closed with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And that way, with the 1/8 inch seam allowance, you don't have to trim it. And it will make this bias tube finish just a little bit wider than 1/4 inch. I'm going to be showing you in a minute tape that I use to tape this to the background, and the tape is 1/4 inch wide. So I want to make these bias tubes just a little bit wider than the 1/4 inch so you're not catching it in your needle. So once you have that 1/8 inch seam done on your tube, all you're going to do is, take this one, you're going to insert you've got a press bar, and actually let me show you this real quick. This is a set of 5 press bars so that you have all different sizes. The size that I'm using is 1/4 inch. So you take the press bar, and that is just going to be inserted into the tube, just like that. And then you're going to spin that seam allowance to the back of the tube. You're going to press it, and then your tube is ready to use. So the tubes are very, very simple to make. And now at this point, I'm going to take a different tube over here. At this point, this is where I can put the double-sided tape on the back here. And so I'm going to just do this very quickly. And just lay this out on the back. And I'm going to be using this tape instead of using pins. Pins can create a little bit of distortion. And with using this double-sided tape, I'm able to get the perfect circles. And also, the other advantage to using the tape is that if you're going to do hand applique, you don't have any pins in there. And as you're pulling your applique thread, it's not catching in any pins. So you can just keep on stitching. It's not going to catch on anything, and it goes very, very quickly. So we've got the tape on the back here, and I'm going to release the paper from the back of the tape, hopefully. And I just pull the paper off. Now, one thing that I like to do is, I like to release, the tape is all the way across the back here. I like to run my fingernail down and release it from the tube so that the tape is actually only sticking to the raw edge here. So that way, when we start going around curves, the tape is not on this part of the tube, it's only on this part of the tube. And then once you actually get it laid down properly, then you can press it firmly and the whole tube will be adhered to the background. So let me show you on here. This is a paper template. And I'm actually going to show you, I'm not going to show you a circle. I'm going to show you this arc right here because this point is a little bit different. Going around circles is going around circles. But as I said before, you definitely want to start at an under intersection so that eventually your tail will be covered up. So I'm going to start right here because I'm going to do this tube right here. And for this particular tube, right here is an under intersection for this tube. And now here's one other point here that I want to point out. Whenever you can, you want to have this raw edge facing the outer edge of your curve. I'm going to show you on this one here. Let me show you this way. When you have the raw edge facing the outer edge of your curve, when you curve it, you get the bulk distributed very nicely. When you have it facing your inner edge, like this, it starts to buckle. So you're much better off having your raw edge facing the outer, let me turn this over, having the raw edge facing the outer edge of your curve. And it will just go around the curves more smoothly. So let's take this over here, and I have the raw edge facing the outer edge of the curve here. And I'm going to start at the under intersection, and I'm just going to lay this down. And I'll just go up to this point here. And you can see how nice and smooth that lays down without any pins. And now for this point here, it's just like a miter on a binding. So all I'm going to do is fold this back on itself. And I want this line here to be parallel with this edge as I fold it back. And then when I fold it towards itself, again, back to itself, it's going to lay just like that. And then I will continue with this tube until I go to the farthest under intersection that I can get to. And it looks as though it's going to be right here. So at this point, I would cut this off right here, and then I would be able to start a new tube at that point and continue on. So you don't have to make the miles of continuous tubing. Now, let's get into the stitch a little bit here. The stitch that I do, a lot of people balk about hand applique, but for mine are all art pieces. I treat mine like oil paintings. They're never going in the washing machine. So with that said, basically what I'm doing with mine is I'm basting them to the background. So I'm going to show you here. You can see how far apart my stitches are. They're about a ½ inch apart. But for this, for it being a wall art, not a problem. I would not do this for a bed quilt, but for wall art, not a problem. And my quilts actually travel quite a bit, and they're holding up just fine. So that is not an issue. And I'm going to show you this stitch that I use. to make it invisible, because as you can see, most of the stitching has been done on this piece, and this stitching is quite invisible. So this is the stitch that I do. I'm going to, on the downstroke, I am only going through the background fabric, and on the upstroke, I am going to go through the background and the tube. So on the downstroke, I am actually going to push this tube back a little bit so that my needle can actually get kind of underneath it at that point. And then I'm going to let my needle travel about a ½ an inch. I'm going to bring it up through the edge of the tube and then pull it through. And you see you have a very invisible stitch there. So you're going to go just down through the background, push your tube back a little bit, go down through the background, and then come up and catch the edge of the tube, and then pull the thread through. So you get very nice invisible stitches that way, but you can also make them very, very long. So the applique will finish up very, very quickly on that. And now I think the last thing that I'm going to show you, I've been asked to, let me talk about this double-sided tape for a second. This is the double-sided tape that I use. This is a wash-away tape, so that if you don't want it in your project, you can dip it in water and it will release. But I have found this is the easiest way to get those perfect circles and not have to have pins in your project. Makes it very, very easy. The last thing I'm going to show you, I've been asked to show you, quite a few of my quilts have the bling on them, have the Swarovski crystals on them. And what I'm using are the Swarovski hot fix crystals. And so what you will do, hot fix crystals already have the glue on them. And so what I will do is I'm just going to pick up a stone and I'll place it wherever I want it to be. And this is actually going to be on your finished quilt top. And even on my, like on this one, this has holographic thread in it, which is like a plastic thread. This doesn't melt it. I thought the first time I did it, I was just going to see that stitching just, and it doesn't melt it. So all you're going to do is this is your heat tool, and you're just going to put it right on top of the stone for 10 seconds, and that's it. And you've got your Swarovski crystals for the occasional quilt. You've got the nice little twinkle to go along with it. But thank you very much for having me.
I really love Kathleen's designs. I love how she takes one Celtic design and puts it in so many different quilts. And you might not have been able to see it from the distance, but she uses a lot of crystals on her quilts, makes them really fabulous. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We wouldn't want you to miss a single show. Please share us with your friends and leave a comment. We would really love to hear from you.